By the time my son and I sat across from each other 8 weeks after Laura's funeral, I had already lost my wife, my standing in my own family, and the simple right to hear my name without somebody lowering their voice. The conference room air conditioner clicked every few seconds. Frank's coffee had gone cold, leaving that burnt office smell under the sharper scent of leather from the blue document wallet between my hands. The zipper teeth pressed into my thumb. Trevor leaned across the table. "You sign this. Mom's company survives. You keep pushing, everybody loses." At 57, I had spent more than 2 decades handling the back end of Laura Whitaker Kitchen. Vendors, schedules, invoices, the things nobody photographed. I kept my pen capped. Frank said quietly, "Scott, nobody is asking you to rush." Trevor looked at him, then back at me. "Dad knows what this is." I slid the papers away. "Tell me again," I said. "Why you moved the donation box." Trevor's jaw shifted. The blue leather under my thumb still carried a faint trace of cedar from Laura's office cabinet. That smell took me back to the funeral. 6 days after my wife died, I stood in a reception hall outside Pittsburgh after burying her, holding a paper cup of coffee I never drank. People kept touching my arm. "Beautiful service, Scott. Laura helped my sister so much. She was one of a kind. Each person meant well. I knew that. But every time somebody said her name, my fingers tightened around the cup until the paper softened." Trevor moved through the room like he had a headset on even though he didn't. He checked the catering table, spoke to the food bank volunteers, adjusted a framed photograph of his mother, and thanked donors by name. He was good at that. That morning, before the service, Frank had called while I was standing in Laura's home office trying to find the tie she liked. "Scott," he'd said, "if Laura marked any papers for the estate inventory, keep them separate. Don't leave them mixed in with condolence cards." On the bottom shelf sat a banker box with Laura's handwriting across the lid. "For Scott." After services, I opened the box only far enough to see a small blue leather document wallet inside. It fit into the inner pocket of my overcoat. I didn't unzip it. Laura had written after services, and I had spent 34 years learning that when my wife underlined a word twice, she had a reason. So the wallet stayed against my ribs through the burial. It was still there when one of the food bank volunteers hurried toward Trevor. "Trevor, the donation box isn't on the table." The words cut through 3 conversations at once. Trevor turned. "What?" "The memorial box. The one for the food bank." A second volunteer lifted a clipboard. "We logged the checks and cash by batch before lunch. We're at about $7,400. But we hadn't done the final count." Trevor crossed the room fast. People began checking chairs and side tables. Then Megan said, "I moved it." Everybody near us stopped. Megan had worked with Laura for years. She stood beside the memorial photographs, with both hands wrapped around her phone. Trevor stared at her. "You what?" "I moved the box," Megan said. "I was told it would be safer in the side office." I watched her eyes move toward Trevor. Only for a second. "Who told you?" I asked. Megan swallowed. "I need a minute, Scott. I don't want to say the wrong thing." Trevor rubbed his palm over his mouth, then turned toward the venue staff. "Could we secure the reception doors for a few minutes?" he asked. "Just until we figure out where the box went." The venue manager's reply was immediate. "Fire exits stay open, Mr. Whitaker, and nobody is being held here." "Of course," Trevor said. "I'm asking people to stay, that's all." The interior doors clicked shut, one after another. Nobody grabbed a guest or blocked an exit, but the sound changed the room. Conversations dropped. Chairs stopped scraping. A woman near the dessert table put her purse under her arm. Trevor raised both hands. "Nobody is accusing anybody. We're just going to check the room." "Nobody is accusing anybody." Then he looked at me. "If stories about family betrayal, buried secrets, and revenge built on the truth keep you listening, subscribe now. There are more family drama stories like this waiting for you." Trevor came closer and lowered his voice, though not low enough. "Dad, you've had a lot on you." I set my coffee down. "What does that mean?" He glanced at Aunt Diane, then at 2 of Laura's longtime friends. "It means you've been handling everything since Mom got sick. Bills, medications, The house. That still doesn't answer me. Trevor exhaled through his nose. You paid the same printing invoice twice in March. There it was. A real mistake. Laura had been in treatment that week. I had been sleeping in a chair beside her bed, answering vendor emails on my phone between nurse visits. I caught the duplicate payment 3 days later and had it reversed. Trevor knew that. So did I. Diane's eyes dropped toward my coat pocket. My son saw it happen. Dad, Trevor said, softer now. Nobody would blame you if you got mixed up. A spoon struck the edge of a coffee cup behind me. Once, then nothing. You think I took the memorial money? I asked. Trevor held up one hand. I didn't say that. No. You just brought up a mistake I made 2 months ago in front of half the family. Because we need to be realistic. I looked around the room. The same people who had hugged me 20 minutes earlier were suddenly studying the floor, my coat, the table beside me. Trevor stepped closer. Dad, empty your pockets. You're the only one I don't trust. Aunt Diane whispered his name. Megan turned away. For a moment, all I could hear was the ventilation fan and the faint rattle of ice settling in a water pitcher. I could have walked out. The venue manager would have let me. I could have told Trevor to go to hell in front of everybody who had come to honor his mother. Instead, I reached into my coat. My keys hit the table first, then my wallet, a folded funeral program, 2 peppermint candies Laura had put in that coat pocket months earlier. Trevor watched each item. My fingers found the blue leather. The second I pulled it free, his face changed. Not much. His shoulders went still, and his eyes fixed on the wallet instead of my hands. Where did you get that? Trevor asked. That was the wrong question. Frank knew about the banker box. Laura had labeled it for me, but Trevor hadn't asked what the wallet was. He knew. I rested it on the table. Your mother left it in her office. Trevor's hand came out. Dad, that's private. So was my coat pocket. I'm serious. Mom had business papers everywhere near the end. This isn't the place to start opening things you don't understand. Laura's friend Marcy looked between us. Trevor, how do you know what's in it? My son ignored her. Give it to me, he said. The room had been worried about $7,400. Trevor wasn't looking for the donation box anymore. Neither was I. I put one hand over the blue wallet. Mom wrote my name on the box it came from. His voice tightened. That doesn't mean she wanted you going through company documents in the middle of her funeral. After services, I said. What? That's what she wrote. For Scott. After services. Trevor's hand remained open between us. I didn't give him the wallet. Behind him, the venue manager came back through the side doorway and shook his head. Nothing yet. A few people started talking again, but quietly now. The missing money was still missing. My keys, wallet, funeral program, and 2 old peppermints sat in plain view. No cash, no checks, no donation envelopes. Yet the accusation didn't disappear with my empty pockets. It had already settled into the room. Trevor glanced toward the doorway, then back at the blue leather. Again. That was when I stopped watching his hands and started watching what he couldn't stop watching. I hooked one finger through the zipper pull. Trevor moved half a step toward me. Dad. Don't. The zipper ran around the edge with a dry little rasp. A stack of papers shifted inside. On the first page, near the bottom, I saw Laura's signature. I hadn't read the heading yet. The heading read, Written Revocation of Limited Licensing Delegation. Trevor saw it at the same time I did. His hand dropped. Dad, he said, put that away. I read the first paragraph twice, because the words kept catching on Laura's name. 6 weeks before she died, she had revoked a limited authority she had given Trevor to negotiate and sign certain licensing deals for Whitaker Kitchen Media. Not his job. Not his title. A specific signing authority. Near the back was a reference to the meeting where Laura had signed it with counsel present. A yellow sticky note sat crooked across the inside cover in her handwriting. Scott. Dates matter. The venue manager called Trevor's name from across the room. Someone had another question about the missing donation box. My son didn't move. Mom changed her mind about things near the end, Trevor said. His voice had gone quieter. I looked at the date again. Did she change her mind about this? That's not what I said. Then what did you say? Trevor's mouth tightened. I said this isn't the place. For once, we agreed. I zipped the wallet closed, put it back inside my coat, and gathered my keys and funeral program from the table. Nobody stopped me when I left the reception room. The venue manager was still checking offices. Megan stood near the memorial photographs with her phone pressed flat between both palms. The money was still missing. So was any reason my son should have known what Laura left me. By the time I got home, the casseroles had already started arriving. 3 sat on the kitchen counter with foil tops and masking tape labels. Somebody had left a lemon pound cake beside the sink. The house smelled like baked cheese, coffee, and the faint vanilla hand cream Laura kept in every room. I carried the blue wallet past all of it. Our test kitchen opened off the back of the house. Laura used to complain that I kept the office side too cold because paper lasted better that way. Her apron still hung from the hook beside the pantry door. I sat at her desk and unzipped the wallet. This time, I read every page. The revocation was plain enough for me to follow. Laura had once given Trevor limited authority for certain licensing transactions. On the date printed at the top, she took that authority back. The paperwork listed Frank, business counsel, and a witness line beneath Laura's signature. No shaky scrawl. No wandering margin notes. Just Laura's neat hand, and the blue ink she always used, because black disappeared too easily in copies. A knock sounded against the open kitchen door. Trevor came in carrying a brown paper bag from the deli Laura liked. "You haven't eaten," he said. "I'm reading." "I can see that." He set the bag down without asking. Pickle brine and warm rye bread slipped into the room. "Dad, seriously, not tonight." I kept one finger on the revocation page. "You knew what this was before I opened it." Trevor pulled out the chair across from me but didn't sit. "I knew Mom had business papers in a blue wallet. That's hardly a conspiracy. I didn't use that word." "You didn't have to." The old answer would have been an apology, something to flatten the room. I had done that for years when Laura and Trevor argued about deadlines or money. Instead, I asked, "Why did she revoke your authority?" His fingertips tapped once against the chair back. "Because she was sick." That's not an answer. She changed her mind a lot. One day she wanted me handling everything. The next day she wanted Frank copied on every email. Then she'd get tired and forget which version we'd agreed on. My eyes went back to the signature. Trevor leaned closer. "You were there. You saw how it got." I had seen Laura stop halfway up the stairs because her breath wouldn't come right. I had seen her fall asleep with a legal pad on her lap. I had seen her ask me the same question twice after a long treatment day. None of that told me why this paper existed. Trevor slid the deli bag toward me. "Let me keep the wallet in the office safe until probate gets sorted out." "No, Dad. No." The word came out cleaner the second time. Trevor looked toward the cabinets lining the back wall. "You don't even know what half those papers mean. I know what dates mean." That got his attention. Laura's sticky note sat between us. Trevor pushed the chair back into place. "Eat something." He left without touching the wallet. The kitchen door clicked shut behind him. I stayed where I was until the refrigerator motor kicked on, then opened the cabinet Trevor had looked at. He used to call it my paper museum. Inside were old vendor corrections, release schedules, invoice copies, insurance certificates, product samples, and binders with labels. Laura teased me for printing too neatly. I had handled the dull side of her business for more than 20 years. When a cookware shipment arrived late, I knew which warehouse had missed the pickup. When a sponsor claimed we approved a different deliverable, I could find the version that said otherwise. Nobody filmed that part. I pulled the current year binder and set it beside the blue wallet. Halfway through, an old printed email slipped loose. Trevor had written it to Laura the year before. "Tell Dad his paper museum is blocking the cabinet I actually need." Laura had replied beneath it. "Your father's paper museum has saved us more than once." I put the page aside. Then I found the April calendar. Near the beginning of the month, Laura had written a meeting in blue pen. Laura, Frank, Business Council, Delegation Review. 2 lines below it were 2 file notes I barely registered at the time. Operating Agreement Amendment, Succession Resolution Draft. I copied both onto my legal pad because I did not yet know whether they had anything to do with Trevor. The meeting date matched the revocation. That didn't prove Laura understood every consequence of what she signed. It didn't answer what Trevor had done with the authority before she took it back, but it made his version harder to swallow. My phone buzzed against the desk. "Megan," I answered. "Scott," she said. "I wanted to call before Trevor did." The chair creaked under me. "About the donation box?" A pause. "Yes. You said somebody told you to move it." "They did." "Who?" Her breathing changed on the line. Then I heard a car door shut somewhere behind her. "I'm not giving a name tonight." "You know the name." "Yes." "Then why won't you say it?" "Because I moved the box, Scott. My hands are on this, whether I meant anything by it or not. I want to speak to the venue manager and Frank before somebody decides I stole $7,000 from a funeral." I looked at Laura's calendar. "Megan, did you ever see this revocation?" Another pause, shorter this time. I scanned the packet for Laura. "For who?" "For Laura and counsel. That's all I'm saying tonight." The call ended before I could ask another question. I sat with the phone in my hand. Megan knew who ordered the box moved. Megan had handled the revocation, and she was scared enough to choose every word like it might be read back to her later. Before Diane called, an email from Trevor landed in my inbox with a document titled Family Agreement. It proposed ending any dispute over the memorial money, keeping the accusation private, and leaving Trevor in daily digital operations while probate was pending. One sentence stopped me. Scott Whitaker is not certain about all financial decisions made during Laura Whitaker's final months. I closed the attachment without signing it. The next call came from Diane. My sister-in-law rarely called after 9. When I answered, she skipped hello. "Scott, Trevor says you're digging through Laura's company files." "I'm reading something Laura labeled for me." Diane sighed. "You know what I mean." "No, I don't think I do anymore." Silence stretched between us. Then she said, "Trevor's worried about you. He told a room full of people I was the only man he didn't trust. He shouldn't have said that." "But," Diane lowered her voice, "he's been saying for a while that numbers have been harder for you." My hand stopped on the calendar page. "How long is a while?" "Months. Show me." "What?" "If he told you that, show me." Diane muttered something under her breath, then said, "Fine, I'm sending it." A message appeared while we were still on the call. It was a screenshot from Trevor. "Keep an eye on Dad when Mom gets worse. He's been having trouble with numbers lately, and he gets defensive if I mention it." The timestamp sat at the top. I read it once. Then again. Laura had not entered hospice yet. Trevor had started telling people I was confused before my wife was even dying at home. Diane was still on the phone when another call lit up my screen. The venue manager. "I need you back here, Mr. Whitaker," he said. "We found the donation box." I closed Trevor's screenshot and stood so fast, Laura's calendar slid off the desk. "Where?" "Side office cabinet. Bottom shelf." The same side office Megan had mentioned. I drove back without calling Trevor. He was already there when I walked into the reception hall. Standing beside the food bank volunteers with his coat off and his sleeves rolled up. The room smelled of stale coffee and lemon cleaner now. Funeral flowers had begun to sag around Laura's photograph. The donation box sat on a folding table, unbroken. One volunteer, Carol, had her clipboard open. The other was sorting checks into small stacks. "We logged by batch before lunch," Carol told me. "Not a final count, just enough so we'd know what came in." Trevor folded his arms. "And?" Carol ran one finger down the page. "We're close. Very close." "How close?" I asked. She checked another sheet. 7,400 and some change between cash and checks. One check was listed twice because it got moved to the food bank sheet. "Once we correct that, it matches what we expected." Trevor let out a breath and slapped one palm against the table. "Good. Then nobody stole anything." I looked at him. "Then why was I the only person you called a thief?" His face tightened. "I never called you a thief." You told a room full of people I was the only person you didn't trust. That's not the same thing. Carol stopped sorting. Trevor lowered his voice. Dad, the money is here. This was a bad misunderstanding. A misunderstanding doesn't empty one man's pockets. You chose to do that. The venue manager looked down at his keys. Nobody said anything for a few seconds. That silence told me more than an apology would have. Everybody had heard what Trevor said at the funeral. Now that the box had turned up, nobody wanted to be the first person to say what it meant. Trevor picked up his coat. We should be grateful this is over. He left before I could answer. It wasn't over. By breakfast the next morning, my phone had 32 unread messages in the family group chat. Most were about flowers, casseroles, and thank you cards. Diane had written, "Thank goodness, the donations were found." Marcy replied with a heart. Someone else wrote, "Such a stressful day for everyone." Not one person mentioned my pockets. I typed, "Trevor accused me in front of all of you," then deleted it. A few minutes later, Diane called. "Scott, please don't drag this out. I didn't move the box." I know. I didn't accuse myself. I know that too. Then what exactly am I dragging out? Her voice softened. Laura just died. Trevor was under pressure. You were under pressure. Let the worst day of your lives be the worst day, and leave it there. I looked across the kitchen at Laura's empty chair. That's easy to say when nobody searched you. Diane didn't answer. An email arrived before lunch from Whitaker Kitchen Media. Subject: Thank you. From Laura Whitaker's family. Trevor's name appeared at the bottom as family representative. Mine didn't appear anywhere except one sentence, asking people to keep Scott and the family in their thoughts. I read that line 3 times. Then Marcy texted, "Glad they found the money." Trevor said everybody was exhausted and things got said the wrong way. I called her. What did he say got said the wrong way? Marcy hesitated. Scott, I don't want to be in the middle. You were in the room. I know. So was I. Another pause. He said nobody actually accused you of stealing, she told me. He said people were worried because you've been overwhelmed. I thanked her and ended the call before my voice changed. That was how fast it worked. By noon, the story was no longer that Trevor had singled me out. The story was that grief had made everybody misunderstand one another. I printed the email. The paper museum had another page. I spent the afternoon at the long work table in the test kitchen with Laura's April calendar on my left and my old operational archive on my right. I wasn't hunting for a confession. I didn't even know what I was hunting for yet. I started with dates. The revocation meeting had happened in early April, so I pulled every email and project printout I personally had from the 2 weeks before and after it. Most were ordinary. Shipping estimates, contractor schedules, retail sample approvals, then one subject line repeated across 3 printouts: national retail and digital expansion. Laura was copied on the earliest version. On a later version, her name was gone. Trevor remained. A file reference at the bottom read, LW license final TW. I stared at the letters. TW. Trevor. Whitaker. The printed page didn't tell me whether he had signed anything. It only told me a file with that name existed after Laura revoked his limited signing authority. My phone rang again. Megan, I spoke to Frank, she said. Then tell me who sent the message. I know who sent it. The refrigerator hummed behind me. Megan, I'm not giving you a screenshot yet. Why not? Because I moved the box, Scott. If this turns into everyone finding somebody to blame, my name is already sitting right in the middle of it. You let my son accuse me. I froze. That doesn't answer the question. No, Megan said. It doesn't. Her voice sounded smaller than it had at the funeral, but I wasn't ready to make excuses for her. Are you protecting Trevor? I'm protecting myself until counsel tells me exactly how to hand this over. Hand what over? She went quiet. Then she said, the message. The call ended a few seconds later. For the first time, I stopped wondering whether Megan remembered who told her to move the donation box. She remembered. She was choosing not to show me. That changed the weight of her silence. Trevor came by near sunset. He didn't bring food this time. He walked straight into the test kitchen and saw the papers spread across the table. "You're doing exactly what I asked you not to do." I tapped the printout. "What's LW license final TW?" He stopped beside the table. "A licensing package." "What kind?" "National retail, digital classes, product expansion." "Signed?" Trevor pulled out a chair and sat. "Dad, this deal is worth about $1.2 million over 3 years if it performs. It keeps contractors working. It funds the expansion. It supports the food bank campaign Mom wanted attached to the rollout." I kept my eyes on him. "When was it signed?" He rubbed both hands over his face. "This is why I didn't want you digging into pieces without context. Give me the context." "Mom was too sick to finish the deal." The sentence landed harder than the number. "What does that mean?" "It means she started it. She approved the direction. Then treatments got worse, and somebody had to keep the company moving." "Somebody, meaning you?" "Yes, me." Trevor leaned forward. "You think I enjoyed making decisions while you sat beside her bed?" I was trying to keep her work alive. There was enough truth in that sentence to make me pause. He had worked. I knew that. He had built the digital side farther than Laura and I ever could have managed alone. But the blue wallet was still locked in my desk drawer. "So, why did she revoke your signing authority?" Trevor stood. "Ask Frank what that document actually covered before you blow up a deal you don't understand." Then he left. I did ask Frank, not for an opinion, for a date. He called the next afternoon after checking the business file through the proper company channel. "There is a signed licensing agreement under review because of Laura's death," he said. My fingers closed around my pen. "When?" "I can send you the cover transmittal you're entitled to see at this stage. Nothing more until we sort the authority questions." The email arrived while we were still speaking. 2 dates. Laura's revocation had been signed on April 3rd. The licensing agreement carried April 14th. I laid the cover page beside the blue wallet. Counted once, then counted again. 11 days. 11 days should have been a small thing. A missed invoice, a late shipment, a calendar error. Instead, I wrote the 2 dates on a yellow legal pad and drew a line between them. April 3rd. Laura revoked Trevor's limited licensing authority. April 14th. Trevor signed the national licensing agreement. The tip of my pen left a black dot beside the second date. Frank had warned me not to turn a date mismatch into a verdict. So I didn't. I built a timeline. By the following afternoon, the long table in the test kitchen held copies of everything I was allowed to see. Laura's revocation. The cover transmittal showing notice had been sent that same day to Trevor and to the licensing company's legal contact. The contract cover page. An advance schedule. Laura's hospice intake date. Her death certificate copy from the funeral paperwork. Gaps remained. I had no reply from Trevor acknowledging the revocation. No full response from the licensing company. And nothing yet proved that the authority Laura took away was the same authority Trevor claimed when he signed. That mattered. I called Frank. "Don't tell me what you think," I said. "Tell me what the contract actually covers." "You're learning," he said. "I'm tired of learning after somebody uses the lesson against me." Frank was quiet for a moment. "Come to the office. I can walk you through the non-privileged schedule and the company records you already had operational access to. Nothing beyond that until the estate authority is in place." His office smelled like toner and old coffee. The paper he slid toward me was thick enough to rasp against my fingertips. "Start here," Frank said. The licensing package covered the Laura Whitaker Kitchen trademark, owned by Whitaker Kitchen Media. Video programs the company had produced, the online class library, certain cookware marks and design assets, digital channels, and specific vendor rights. I ran my finger farther down the list. Cookbook rights belonging to Laura's publisher were excluded. So was television footage controlled by a network. That distinction mattered more than I expected. For years, people had said Laura owned everything with her face on it. She never talked that way at home. A cookbook had a publisher. A television segment had a network. The videos we shot ourselves belonged somewhere else. I could still remember taping labels to hard drives at midnight while Laura tested a pie crust for the 6th time. Her name was the part people saw. The ownership lived in the boring pages behind it. Good, Frank said. Keep separating what the company owns from what people casually call Laura's brand. On the signature page, Trevor's name appeared beneath a representation that he had the authority required to bind the company for the listed transaction. I looked up. That's his statement? That's what he signed. After the revocation. After the date on the revocation, Frank corrected. We still need to establish scope, notice, and what each party knew. Dates are evidence. They aren't magic. I hated that sentence because it was sensible. I wrote it down anyway, right beneath the dates. The next page bothered me more. Under transition and consulting costs, sat a line for Whitaker Digital Strategy LLC. Proposed fee, $110,000. The name was familiar. I had processed smaller invoices from that company before Laura got sick. Trevor used it for digital strategy work outside his salary package, always with Laura's approval when the work fell outside his normal duties. This is Trevor's LLC, I said. Frank nodded once. As far as the records show. Was this paid? I'm not answering that from an incomplete schedule. Was any of it paid? Scott. I leaned back. There it was again, a line I could see but not yet cross. By the time I left Frank's office, the question had changed. It was no longer just why Trevor signed 11 days later. It was whether he signed knowing Laura had taken that lane away, and whether the company on the other side knew it too. Trevor answered my call on the 4th ring. You're at Frank's, he said. Not hello. How'd you know? Because he called me. I saw the licensing scope. Trevor exhaled. Great. And your consulting company? A pause. Then he said, so now we're pretending my company is suspicious because my name is on it? $110,000 is a lot of pretending. It's a proposed transition fee over the rollout. Staffing, migration, digital conversion, vendor coordination. You know what those words mean. I know what a fee means. What you don't know is the authority structure. Laura revoked your licensing authority. 1 lane, Dad, not the whole road. I looked through the windshield at Frank's brick office building. Then show me where she restored the lane you signed in. Trevor's voice sharpened. You weren't in those meetings. Neither was I when she signed the revocation. That's why I'm reading the documents instead of guessing. You're reading pieces. So give me the piece I'm missing. He didn't. Instead, Trevor said, Mom kept me as chief digital officer. She never removed me from operations. She knew the deal was moving. That's not the same as signing authority. You've been talking to Frank too much. And you've been talking about me to everybody else. The line went quiet. Trevor lowered his voice. This isn't about the funeral anymore. No. I'm starting to notice that. He ended the call. Megan agreed to meet me the next morning at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the studio office. She chose a corner table where nobody from the company usually went. Her paper cup stayed untouched. I scanned Laura's revocation packet, she said. Laura asked me to. I sent the file where counsel told me to send it. Did Trevor know you scanned it? Megan rubbed the cardboard sleeve with her thumb. Trevor knew I handled documents for Laura. I also handled logistics for him. Calendars, event details, shipping, the funeral reception, including the donation box. Her eyes dropped. Yes. You still have the message telling you to move it. Megan looked at me for a long second. I have my phone. That wasn't my question. I know. Why won't you show me? Because the second I hand over one screenshot, I stop being the assistant who followed a security instruction and become the woman who physically moved $7,400 right before your son accused you. You did move it. Yes, the word, barely carried across the table, and I have to live with the fact that I stood there while he made you empty your pockets. For the first time, she looked straight at me. I'm not asking you to forgive that. I'm asking you to let me hand things over the right way. I left without the message. That should have made Megan look worse. Somehow, it made the whole thing look more deliberate. Diane called that evening. I found something else, she said. My legal pad was still open on the kitchen table. What? A screenshot Trevor sent me in April. My chair scraped the floor. Send it. It's about you. Send it anyway. The image arrived. At the top was Laura's name, as Trevor had saved it in his phone. Only one line of the conversation was visible. Scott cannot handle another fight right now. Nothing before it. Nothing after it. Diane spoke softly through the phone. Trevor sent me that, when I asked why you weren't in one of the business meetings. I pinched the screen larger, even though there was nothing else to read. Did Laura send this to him? That's what Trevor said. You never saw the full thread? No. I set the phone beside Laura's revocation. For days, every new date had moved me away from Trevor's version of events. That sentence moved me half a step back. Scott cannot handle another fight right now. Laura knew how tired I was. She knew how many nights I slept beside her treatment chair. She knew I had already started making mistakes I normally caught before anybody saw them. Maybe Trevor had twisted her words. Maybe he hadn't. For the first time since the funeral, I had a document in front of me that made me wonder whether my son was lying about everything, or only about the parts he needed me to believe. The message from Laura stayed on my phone, while the first weeks of probate moved past. By the time Frank called me with the next piece, the County Register of Wills had issued my letters testamentary. Frank was careful about the wording when he called. You can now request records in your capacity as personal representative, he said. That does not mean every document answers every question. I know. Good. Come in. His office copier was running when I arrived. Warm paper and toner filled the hallway. Frank handed me a thin packet and tapped the first page with one finger. This is the transmittal thread for Laura's revocation. The email chain began on April 3rd. Business counsel sent the signed revocation to Trevor and to the legal contact at the licensing company. The subject line was plain enough that nobody could mistake it for a lunch invitation. Revocation of limited licensing delegation. Below that sat Trevor's reply. Understood. T. 2 words and an initial. I read them again. Frank didn't speak, so he got it. The record shows that account received it and responded. He knew. The response makes that hard to dispute. My thumb rubbed the edge of the paper until it warmed. For weeks I had left room for explanations. Maybe Laura told Trevor something later. Maybe the document covered a narrower lane than I thought. Maybe he never saw it before signing. That last possibility was gone. I turned the page. The licensing company's legal contact had answered 19 minutes after Trevor. Received. We will update our file. I looked up. They knew too. They received notice, Frank said. That matters. It does not mean the contract vanishes because we wish it did. But Trevor signed 11 days later, saying he had authority. Yes. And they had already been told his authority was revoked. Yes. The copier stopped behind the wall. For the first time, this wasn't just my word against my son's. 2 separate inboxes had received Laura's decision before Trevor signed anything. Frank sat across from me. Now be careful with what you do next. Why? Because being right about one document does not tell you what happens to payroll, vendors, or the rollout if the agreement gets challenged. I folded the packet closed. Trevor had already told me that part. On the drive home, I kept hearing his voice from the funeral. Dad, empty your pockets. Then the blue wallet came out, and his first question had not been what it was. Where did you get that? At the time, I thought he was afraid of a private paper. Now the pieces sat differently. He knew Laura had revoked him. He knew the licensing company had been notified. He knew the agreement carried a later date. And before probate could even begin, he had spent months telling people I was having trouble with numbers. Then $7,400 disappeared at Laura's funeral for less than an hour, long enough to put every eye in the room on me. I pulled into my driveway and left the engine running. The donation money had never been the prize. My credibility had been. Diane came over that evening with another screenshot, printed on regular copy paper, because, as she put it, I don't want this disappearing off my phone and then having you tell me I imagined it. The message was from Trevor, sent 2 weeks before Laura entered hospice. Dad shouldn't sign anything under stress right now. If paperwork comes up, call me first. Diane set the page on my table. I thought he was protecting you, she said. So did everybody. Her lips pressed together. Maybe part of him was. Maybe. I didn't need Trevor to be a monster for the dates to stay where they were. The next morning, I contacted one of our longtime packaging vendors from the company account I was authorized to use. I asked a narrow question about who had handled approval communications while Laura was sick. The vendor forwarded an email Trevor had sent in late March. Please route anything requiring signature through me. Dad is overwhelmed and should not be signing under stress. I printed it. Different recipient. Same idea. That afternoon, Megan called. Trevor used to say you needed rest, she told me. Usually when people asked why you weren't copied on something. Did you ever hear Laura say, I couldn't handle paperwork? Not to me. That's not the same as never. No, Megan said. It isn't. I appreciated that answer more than reassurance. After we hung up, I pulled up the screenshot Diane had sent me earlier, the one with Laura's words about me not handling another fight. I had spent days treating that sentence like a door I could not open. This time, I read what was actually there, instead of what Trevor had told Diane it meant. Scott cannot handle another fight right now. No mention of numbers. No instruction to keep me away from contracts. No statement that I was confused. Laura might have wanted to protect me. She might have been angry with me. She might have been talking about something else entirely. I still did not have the missing lines. What I did have was Trevor's habit of supplying the meaning afterward. I called Diane back. When he sent you that screenshot, did you ask for the rest of the conversation? No, she said. I believed him. So did I. The words sat badly in my mouth, but they were true. For years, Trevor had been the one who translated the digital side of Laura's business for people who did not live inside it. That made him useful. It also meant nobody noticed how often his explanation arrived before the original document. By Friday, the test kitchen table held the revocation, Trevor's acknowledgement, the licensing company's acknowledgement, Diane's messages, and the vendor email. I called my son. Come over. Trevor arrived 40 minutes later, wearing the same navy jacket he used for investor meetings. He stopped when he saw the papers arranged in date order. You've been busy. Sit down. He stayed standing. I pointed to his reply. Understood. T. Trevor glanced at it. I remember. That answer surprised me more than denial would have. You received the revocation. Yes. You knew the licensing company received it. Yes. And you signed 11 days later. Trevor pulled out the chair and sat at last. Mom was scared. Of what? Of everything changing too fast. Her treatments were getting worse. She wanted Frank copied. She wanted more checks. She wanted to slow things down. That's not the same as giving you authority back. No, Dad, it isn't. His answer came flat and quick. I waited. Trevor leaned forward. But the deal had momentum. Retail had shelf windows. Contractors were booked. The digital conversion was already underway. If we missed the launch, we lost a year. So you signed anyway. I kept the business moving. You represented that you had authority. I represented what the company needed in order to finish something Mom had already started. The chair creaked as I shifted back. That sentence isn't the same thing. Trevor's palm hit the table once, not hard enough to scatter anything. You were holding her hand, Dad. I was saving the business. There it was. Not an apology. A division of labor he had written after the fact. I had been the husband in the hospital room. He had been the son entitled to decide what survived outside it. I pushed Diane's screenshot toward him. You also spent months telling people I couldn't handle numbers. You made mistakes. I made one duplicate payment and fixed it. You were exhausted. So you made sure everybody knew. I made sure people didn't dump more on you. At Mom's funeral, too, Trevor looked away. For 1 second, I thought he might finally answer the question about the donation box. He didn't. Instead, he gathered the contract pages into a neat stack and pushed them back toward me. You want to challenge the deal? Fine. His voice had gone calm again. Legal will freeze the rollout while authority gets reviewed. The next advance won't clear. Vendors have already staffed for launch. The food bank campaign is tied to the release. Mom's illness slowed revenue for months, so there isn't a giant cushion sitting around waiting for you to make a point. I watched him. Is that a threat? No. Trevor stood. It's a bill. He buttoned his jacket. Use those emails, Dad. Then explain to Mom's staff why the expansion money stopped. Trevor was right about one thing. There was a bill. It arrived Monday morning in the form of a cash flow report from Whitaker Kitchen Media. 6 pages of numbers I had helped build systems to track long before anybody called them dashboards. The licensing advance had been $240,000. Not all of it had stayed in the company. A line under transition services showed $55,000 already paid to Whitaker Digital Strategy LLC, Trevor's company. The remaining $55,000 of his proposed consulting fee had not cleared. Legal review had put it on hold with the rest of the disputed rollout payments. I read the payment date, then I pulled the old vendor file where Trevor's LLC first appeared years earlier. Back then, Laura had approved each extra project in writing: website rebuild, video conversion, subscriber migration, work outside his normal salary. Trevor did the work, and the company paid him. That history mattered. So did what was missing now. No final approval from Laura for the $110,000 fee sat beside the national deal. I called Trevor. He answered with, "What now?" $55,000. Silence. Then he said, "My company earned it. I didn't ask whether you worked. You're sure acting like it. Show me Mom's final approval." Trevor gave a short laugh. "Dad, you've spent more than 20 years pretending everything important comes with your preferred piece of paper. Show me the wrong piece then. I have draft budgets, negotiation schedules, emails about transition. Do any of them approve your fee after she revoked your signing authority? You keep combining two separate things. Because your name is on both." Trevor's chair creaked through the phone. "For 8 years, he said. I built the digital side, while you complained about passwords and saved printouts in cabinets. The audience tripled. Online classes became real revenue. Retail stopped treating Mom like a local personality with a cookbook. I know what you built. Do you?" Yes. That stopped him. I had no need to erase his work to question his authority. "You earned a salary," I said. "You earned approved project fees before. Maybe this transition work deserved payment too. But deserving to be paid and approving your own fee inside a deal you signed after Mom revoked, you are not the same thing." Trevor's voice cooled. "Then let legal sort it out." They already were. By Wednesday, the licensing partner paused the next advance and suspended rollout activity that depended on the disputed agreement. Nobody canceled the company. Nobody padlocked the studio. But the effects still showed up where Trevor said it would. Contractor overtime disappeared first. A product shoot scheduled for Friday moved off the calendar. Then the new food bank campaign tied to the national launch was pushed back pending revised funding dates. I saw the human part that afternoon. Maria Alvarez had worked production with Laura for 9 years, mostly part-time, more during launches. She stood near the studio schedule board with a pencil tucked behind one ear, staring at a revised sheet. "You're down 12 hours next week," I said. Maria looked over her shoulder. "Looks that way. I'm sorry." She removed the pencil and rolled it between her fingers. "My husband picked up Saturday at the hospital, so we'll manage." That made it worse. Maria didn't accuse me. She didn't ask me to stop the review. She simply erased her name from 2 shifts. At the edge of the board, Friday's food bank shoot had been marked postponed. Laura had planned those spots herself before treatment took over her calendar. They were supposed to feature pantry volunteers instead of celebrities, because she used to say hunger already came with enough embarrassment. Maria followed my eyes. She was excited about that one, she said. "I know. You going to cancel it?" "I don't know yet." Maria tucked the pencil behind her ear again. "Then don't promise me anything. No anger. No plea. Just a woman whose paycheck and work calendar had landed inside a fight she never asked to join." That was the part Trevor understood better than I wanted him to. Across the room, another contractor carried lighting cases back into storage because the postponed shoot no longer needed them. Trevor came through the studio doors 10 minutes later. He looked at the schedule, then at me. I told you. Maria pretended not to hear. I walked toward the hallway. Trevor followed. You wanted proof, he said. There it is. That schedule doesn't prove you had authority. No. It proves paperwork has consequences. So does signing the wrong paperwork. His mouth pulled tight. You really need this to be simple, don't you? I need it to be true. Behind us, someone peeled a production label from a rolling cart. The adhesive made a slow, tearing sound. Trevor lowered his voice. Mom would hate this. There it was again. Not Laura's words. His version of them. Diane used the same line that evening. She came to the house with a grocery bag and put milk in my refrigerator, as if that still gave her the right to tell me what my wife would have wanted. Maria called Marcy, Diane said. People are losing hours. Some contractor hours were cut. You know what I mean. Yes, I do. Diane closed the refrigerator door. Laura spent 20 years building that name. She would not want lawyers dragging it through a fight between you and Trevor. I leaned against the counter. This fight started before she died. That's your interpretation. No, the revocation has a date. Trevor's acknowledgement has a date. His signature has a date. And Laura also said you couldn't handle another fight. I went still. Diane saw it. That came from Trevor, I said. It came from Laura. One sentence came from Laura. The meaning came from Trevor. After Diane left, I opened the authorized business archive Frank had given me access to as executor. I searched the subject line around the screenshot date. There it was, the full thread. Laura had been writing to Trevor about a disagreement over the national rollout. 3 messages above the sentence he forwarded, she wrote, Your father has been at every treatment this week and is sleeping 4 hours a night. I am not pulling him into another fight with you while I am trying to get through this cycle. Then the line Diane had seen. Scott cannot handle another fight right now. The next sentence changed everything Trevor had made it mean. That is not the same as saying he cannot understand the business. I sat back. Laura had not declared me incompetent. She had been trying to keep me out of one more argument while I was caring for her. Trevor had cropped away the sentence that protected me and passed along the one that made me look weak. My phone rang before I could call Diane. Trevor. I hear you found the full thread, he said. Frank told you? No. Diane did. Of course she had, Trevor continued. Fine. You want to be right about that too? Be right. That's generous. I'm offering a way out. I looked at Maria's revised schedule lying beside my legal pad. What kind? I repay the $55,000 already transferred. I waive the rest of the consulting fee. We amend the licensing paperwork through whoever legal says has proper authority. The rollout continues. And the funeral? A pause. What about it? You told people I was the only person you didn't trust. Dad, you knew that box had been moved? He didn't answer. Correct what you said. We are not turning Mom's funeral into some public confession exercise. It already became something else when you made me empty my pockets. Trevor's breath came hard through the speaker. You want the business saved, or you want an apology? I want the truth corrected. The money was found. Nobody thinks you stole it. Then saying so should be easy. Silence. Not agreement. Not refusal. Just enough silence to tell me which part of the settlement mattered most to him. Trevor finally said, Think about the people whose hours you're cutting. The call ended. The next morning, I went back to the studio. Maria's name had been erased from another afternoon shift. 2 contractors were gone from the Friday board entirely. At the bottom, in Trevor's handwriting, someone had added, Reduced schedule pending legal review. I stood there longer than I meant to. The proof was getting stronger. So was the price. The price got easier to measure once I stopped pretending the question was whether Laura had chosen me over Trevor. Frank put 2 documents on his conference table the following Monday. One was the amended operating agreement for Whitaker Kitchen Media. The other was a written succession resolution. I recognized the names before I opened them. Laura had written both beside the delegation review on her April calendar, but at the time, I had treated them as routine business housekeeping. Frank tapped the folder. Your letters testamentary are already in place. so you can read the full succession file now as executor. What you cannot do is treat the company like personal property. I don't want the company." He gave me the look attorneys give when they hear a sentence they intend to test against paper. "Read first." The operating agreement smelled faintly of toner. My thumb caught on the raised seal of the notary page. Laura had signed the amendment during the same period she revoked Trevor's special licensing authority. The first section I understood immediately. When Laura died, the estate representative would hold temporary transition authority over her membership interest. Temporary. A later section required the company to move to an independent manager with oversight during the transition. Neither Trevor nor I inherited permanent sole control simply because we were family. I stopped reading. She didn't leave it to either of us. Frank folded his hands. Not permanent control. I turned another page. Transactions involving an officer's own company had to be reviewed independently. Royalty income from the Laura Whitaker Kitchen licensing program included a defined allocation to the food bank work she had supported. The rest stayed within the company and estate structure, according to the agreement. Laura had thought past her own death farther than either Trevor or I had given her credit for. For weeks, I had been carrying one private question under everything else. Did she trust me more? The answer in front of me was not the answer I had been chasing. She trusted me to get the company through a transfer without keeping it. That hurt in a cleaner way. No throne. No victory where my name replaced hers or Trevor's on an office door. Just work. Frank slid a second copy toward me. The agreement gives you a transition duty. It also gives you a process. What does the process require? An independent manager. Review of the disputed licensing agreement. Review of related officer transactions. Then whatever action the documents allow based on the record. Can Trevor stay chief digital officer while that happens? For now, unless the review produces grounds for suspension or removal under the agreement. So I don't fire him. Not because you're angry at him. I closed the folder. Good. Frank's eyebrow moved. You sound relieved. I am. That answer surprised me too. If I removed Trevor by myself, every argument he had been making about me wanting Laura's company would get another coat of paint. An independent process meant I had to accept something harder. I might not control the outcome. I signed the instruction authorizing the next transition step, but Frank held up one finger before taking it. Once this starts, Scott, you don't get to tell the reviewer what conclusion to reach. I know. Do you? I looked at Laura's signature at the bottom of the succession resolution. Apparently she did. My phone buzzed before I left Frank's office. Megan, can I come in? I have the message. 20 minutes later, she sat beside me at the end of Frank's conference table. She had brought no folder, just her personal phone and a charging cable wrapped tightly around her fingers. Frank spoke first. Megan, nobody here wants you guessing. Show us what you actually have. She unlocked the phone, opened an old backup, and scrolled. Her thumb stopped. There. The message was from Trevor. Move the donation box into the side office. Too many people coming through. Sent during the funeral reception. I read it twice. Nothing dramatic followed. No instruction to steal the money. No message saying, "Frame Dad." Just a security instruction that, standing alone, could have sounded reasonable. Except Trevor had stood in that room later and acted as if he had no idea where the box had gone. Did you answer? I asked. Megan scrolled one line lower. Done. Bottom cabinet so it's out of sight. Trevor had reacted with a thumbs up. My chair made a hard scrape against the floor when I shifted. You told him exactly where you put it. Yes. Then he knew. Megan nodded. Why didn't you say this at the funeral? Her fingers tightened around the charging cable. Because when he started asking where the box was, I thought I had misunderstood him. Then he turned toward you, and everybody started looking at pockets and purses. She swallowed. I knew my hands were the ones that moved $7,400 out of the room. All I could think was that if I said Trevor told me to do it, he could say I misunderstood, and then I was the employee who had hidden funeral money. You let me stand there. Yes. No excuse came after it, Frank asked. Did Trevor contact you after the box was found? Megan scrolled again. One message. Glad that got sorted. No need to make a bad day worse. I looked across the table at her. And you kept that too. I kept everything after the funeral. Why? Because by then, I knew I needed to. That was the first thing she said that made me believe she had stopped protecting comfort and started protecting the record. It did not erase her silence. I told her so. You could have ended that accusation before I emptied my pockets. Her eyes stayed on the phone. I know. Frank arranged for copies of the messages to be preserved with source information from the device and backup, rather than relying on a cropped screenshot. By the time Megan left, the funeral sequence no longer depended on anybody's memory alone. The volunteer log showed the donations had been recorded in batches before they disappeared from the table. Megan's message showed Trevor ordered the box moved. Her reply told him where she put it. The recovered box was intact, and the count matched after the duplicate check entry was corrected. And several people had heard Trevor say I was the only person he did not trust. One question still had no neat answer. Why? The licensing dispute gave Trevor a reason to want me weak. His months of messages about my supposed trouble with numbers showed he had already been shaping that picture. But I still did not have a message saying he planned the funeral accusation. I didn't need to invent one. The facts we had were enough to change what I did next. That evening, I sat alone in Laura's test kitchen with the amended operating agreement open beside the blue wallet. Her apron still hung by the pantry. For years, I had thought keeping every invoice and vendor correction was how I protected what we built. Laura had left me a different job: protect the process, even from our son. I called Frank. Start the independent review. He paused. You're sure? Yes. The manager will review Trevor's authority, the licensing agreement, his LLC payment, and the succession requirements. I'll also bring the licensing company's legal representative into the review so they can address the notice they received. Trevor will be notified. I understand. This could end with him losing management authority. I understand that too. Frank's voice softened a little. And if the company can preserve a lawful version of the deal, then preserve it. That mattered. I wasn't asking anyone to burn down Laura's business to punish Trevor. I wanted the company alive. I wanted the food bank work funded. I wanted the contract repaired if it could be repaired. But I also wanted one sentence corrected. My father stole nothing. Before hanging up, I added one more instruction. Put the funeral messages in the review file. Frank was silent for half a second. Because they speak to credibility? Because he used the company fight to make me look unfit before I even knew there was a fight. All right. I ended the call. A minute later, an email confirmation arrived. Independent management review initiated. I printed it. Then I placed it at the front of Laura's succession file. For the first time since the funeral, I was no longer trying to prove I deserved her chair. I had just signed the paper that could take my son out of his. By the 8th week after Laura's funeral, 3 days had passed since I authorized the independent review, and Frank asked me to come back to his office. Trevor was already there. So was Elaine Porter, the independent manager, appointed under Laura's succession documents, and Martin Wells, the licensing company representative Frank had brought into 2 review calls. It was the first time I had sat across a table from him. A fresh copy of the licensing agreement lay between us. Trevor tapped it with one finger. This keeps the rollout alive. Frank looked at me. It's a settlement framework. Nothing is final unless the parties agree. Elaine spoke next. Her voice was even and plain. The disputed fee would be repaid. The unpaid portion would be waived. The licensing agreement would be amended, so any future authority comes through the proper company process. Martin added, if that happens, we can restart the schedule without waiting for a full contract fight. That sounded almost clean. Then I reached the paragraph about management. Trevor would remain Chief Digital Officer during the transition. He would continue leading the digital team and serving as the company's main public representative for the Laura Whitaker kitchen rollout, subject to Elaine's oversight. I read it again. And the funeral? Nobody answered right away. Trevor leaned back. What about it? Frank slid one page toward me. This agreement does not resolve personal family claims or require a public statement about the memorial reception. So nothing changes there. It separates the business settlement from the family dispute, Frank said. Trevor rubbed his thumb along the edge of his water glass, which is what adults do when a company has 12 employees and vendors waiting for an answer. Elaine looked at him. Let's keep this to the terms. For once, I did not need her help. The terms were clear. Trevor would return the $55,000 already paid to his LLC and walk away from the other $55,000. The licensing partner would not pretend the original authority problem never happened. Elaine would keep oversight. The agreement could be repaired instead of buried under months of fighting. And Trevor would keep the microphone. That was the part nobody had written in bold. There was another narrow sentence buried beneath the management section. Under Trevor's proposal, Elaine's review would continue only far enough to confirm the authority problem, the repayment, and the amended licensing structure. The funeral conduct would stay outside the business findings. So would any broader question about the story Trevor had been telling people about my ability to manage numbers. I pointed to it. You wrote this limit? Trevor answered before Frank could. I proposed keeping a business review about business. Elaine rested her pen on the table. For clarity, Mr. Whitaker, I have not agreed to narrow my review. That's part of what is being negotiated here. Trevor turned to Martin instead of me. And the licensing company needs certainty, correct? Martin chose his words carefully. We need lawful authority and a workable management structure. Certainty helps, but not at the expense of those two things. Trevor nodded as though Martin had supported him anyway. Diane called while Frank gave Martin a few minutes to speak with his office. Please tell me you're going to sign, she said. I stepped into the hallway. Who told you there was something to sign? Trevor. And before you start, yes, I know you're tired of hearing his version first. Then stop repeating it first. She let that sit. Scott. Maria lost more hours this week. Marcy says one of the vendors is holding inventory. How much more proof do you need that this is hurting people who had nothing to do with the funeral? The hallway smelled like copier paper and somebody's reheated soup. The agreement fixes most of that, I said. Then sign it. It fixes the money. Diane lowered her voice. What else is there? I nearly laughed, but nothing came out. You were in the room. I know what happened. Do you? She sighed. I know Trevor was wrong. I also know Laura's company shouldn't die because you need him to say it in exactly the right words. That sentence followed me back into the conference room. Martin had rejoined the table. Elaine was reading notes. Trevor did not look at me. Frank pushed the signature page closer. Take your time. I picked up the pen. For a few seconds, I saw Maria erasing her name from the studio schedule. I saw the food bank shoot marked postponed. I pictured lighting cases going back into storage and vendors waiting on money they had planned around. The agreement gave almost all of that a path forward. My pen touched the paper. Trevor exhaled. Then Martin said, Once we have this, our communications team can move forward with Trevor on the revised launch narrative. I looked up. Revised launch narrative? Martin glanced toward Trevor. The public messaging around Laura's legacy, continuity, and the new management oversight. Standard transition material. Trevor finally met my eyes. It's marketing, Dad. And you're still the one speaking for her. I'm the chief digital officer. That's my job. Elaine closed her folder. Public representation can be reviewed separately if governance requires it. It is not being removed under the current settlement draft. My pen stayed on the page. There was nothing illegal about that sentence. Nothing hidden. That was what made it harder. I could sign, recover the money, repair the contract, protect the staff, and go home with everybody telling me I had been reasonable. Trevor would still be able to say the funeral was a misunderstanding. He would still be the person standing in front of Laura's name. I set the pen down. I need to see the studio before I decide. Trevor's chair shifted. Dad, we're all here now. Then you'll still be here when I get back. Nobody tried to stop me. At the studio, the front lights were off, even though it was mid-afternoon. Only the work lights above the test kitchen were on. Maria stood at a counterboxing sample cookware that would have gone to the postponed shoot. She looked at my coat and then at the clock. Meeting going well? Depends what you call well. Maria folded one cardboard flap over another. That's usually how meetings go. I looked at the schedule board. Several shifts were still blank. The food bank campaign remained postponed. If the agreement gets fixed, I said, the rollout may restart. Maria pressed tape across the box. Good. That was all. No speech about justice. No request to save her hours. She picked up another carton. You don't want to know what I have to give up to make that happen? Maria looked at me. Mr. Whitaker, that's above my pay grade. I just need whoever signs things to mean what they sign. I stood there with that sentence longer than she probably expected. When I returned to Frank's office, Trevor was at the window with his phone in his hand. Can we finish this? He asked. I sat down. One correction. His shoulders lowered a fraction. Here we go. Written. To the family members who were there, the memorial committee, and the business people, you told I was confused or unreliable. You state that I did not take the funeral donations and that you knew the box had been moved before you accused me. Trevor stared at me. No. Then we're not finished. The money was found. That isn't a correction. Nothing was stolen. Everybody knows that. You made sure they knew something else first. Trevor looked at Frank, then Elaine, as if one of them might translate me into something more convenient. Neither did, I continued. You also don't keep sole management control during transition. Elaine stays in the authority chain. Your LLC repayment gets formalized. The licensing deal moves only if the independent review confirms the amended structure is lawful. Trevor pushed back from the table. You want to humiliate me? No. I want the record corrected. Once this settles, people will forget the funeral. There it was. I looked at him. Why should they forget something you haven't corrected? Because no money was stolen. Why reopen it? The words came out almost impatiently, like truth had become an inefficient line item. I picked up the settlement draft. For 1 second, I thought about signing anyway. Then I tore nothing, slammed nothing, and made no speech. I slid the unsigned pages back to Frank. Continue the review. Trevor stood. You know where this can end. I did. If Elaine found grounds under Laura's own documents, my son could lose the management authority he had spent 8 years building. I looked at Frank. Continue. Trevor did not sit back down. He stayed beside the conference table with one hand on the back of his chair, looking at me as if I had just chosen a stranger over my own blood. Frank gathered the unsigned settlement pages without comment. Elaine Porter closed her review binder, then reopened it. We should finish the record, she said. Trevor gave a dry laugh. The record. Right. Martin Wells from the licensing company shifted his legal pad closer. Nobody rushed him. Nobody had to. The blue document wallet sat beside my hand now. I had brought it because every paper that mattered had started there. Trevor looked at it. Then he looked at me. You sign this. Mom's company survives. You keep pushing, everybody loses. His warning landed differently with the full record spread between us. I rested my palm on the blue leather. Tell me again why you moved the donation box. Trevor's mouth tightened. I didn't move it. No, Megan did. He looked toward Elaine. Are we seriously doing funeral drama in a business review? Elaine answered, before I could. We are reviewing conduct tied to credibility, management judgment, and statements made while authority was already disputed. Trevor turned back to me. Fine. Megan moved the box because there were too many people around. On your instruction. Yes. She told you where she put it. His eyes flicking toward Frank. Yes. The money stayed intact, as far as anyone knows. I slid the volunteer count log across the table. Batch records before the move. Final count after recovery. The duplicate check entry was corrected. Nothing meaningful was missing. Trevor pushed the page back. So what? You stood in that room and acted like you had no idea where the box went. I was trying to figure out what happened. You already knew what happened. That is not the same as knowing it was still there. No. But it is the difference between panic and pretending. His jaw moved once. I kept going. You asked people to stay. Then you brought up one duplicate invoice I had already fixed months earlier. Then you told everyone I was the only person you didn't trust. Trevor looked at Martin, as though the licensing representative should be embarrassed for me. This is personal. It became business when you spent months telling vendors and relatives I couldn't handle numbers. You were exhausted. Laura said I was exhausted. I placed the full email thread beside the cropped screenshot. She also said that wasn't the same as me not understanding the business. Trevor said nothing. That was enough on the funeral. I did not need him to confess to a plan he would never describe in the words I wanted. The record already showed what he knew, what he said, and when he said it, Frank moved the blue wallet closer to the center. I unzipped it and removed Laura's revocation. April 3rd. Trevor leaned back. You've said the date 100 times. I only need it once. Next came the transmittal thread. You received the revocation. Understood. T. Sat beneath the notice. Then the licensing company acknowledgement. Martin nodded slightly when I placed it down. We received notice, he said. I added the agreement Trevor signed 11 days later. His representation of authority was on the signature page. Last came the payment schedule for Whitaker Digital Strategy LLC. $55,000 already paid, I said. $55,000 held after review started. Trevor put both hands flat on the table. I did the work. I know. Then stop saying that number like I stole it. I haven't called you a thief. The sentence stopped him, maybe because he remembered how carefully he had avoided that exact word at Laura's funeral. I continued. You did real work. You helped grow the digital side for 8 years. You were paid a salary. You had approved project fees before. None of that answers why you signed after acknowledging the revocation, or why your own LLC was inside the transaction without the required independent approval. Trevor's face hardened. You want to know why you kept all those papers, Dad? I waited. Because you always thought this was yours. His fingers swept toward my folders. Every invoice, every vendor correction, every stupid printed email. You stood behind Mom for 20 years keeping receipts, because someday you wanted somebody to admit you built it too. The words found the place he aimed for. I could hear Laura laughing years earlier, when she called my file cabinets the least photogenic part of her business. I remembered loading cookware into our station wagon before Trevor was old enough to drive. Late nights correcting shipping lists while her face went on book jackets. Trevor saw me pause, so he pressed harder. You hated that people knew her name and not yours. No. You hated that I understood where the company was going and you didn't. I opened another folder. No, Trevor. This is the part you never understood. The amended operating agreement went down first. Then Laura's written succession resolution. Elaine already had certified copies in her binder. Nothing on the table was new. Mom didn't give me permanent control, I said. Trevor glanced at the pages. She gave the estate temporary transition authority. The company moves to independent management. I already signed the transition instruction. His eyes shifted to Elaine. I continued. When the transition is complete, I'm not president. I'm not manager. I'm not taking your office. I don't get sole control. For the first time that afternoon, Trevor had nothing ready. I slid my signed instruction toward him. You spent months telling people I wanted what belonged to Mom because that is what you wanted. Elaine opened her binder. My review is complete enough to act on the management question. Trevor looked at her sharply. She spoke without drama. The documented revocation, acknowledgement, later authority representation, related party payment, and failure to obtain the required independent approval establish grounds under the operating agreement to remove you from management authority during the transition. Trevor's chair scraped as he finally sat. You're firing me. I am implementing the company process your mother signed, Elaine said. Your employment rights, if any remain outside management authority, will be handled separately under the applicable agreements. Today's action removes management and approval authority. Martin took over. Our company will not proceed under the disputed agreement as signed. Because we had notice of the revocation, we are prepared to negotiate a replacement agreement with the authorized company representative. So, the deal survives? I asked. If lawful terms can be reached, that is our preference. Elaine added that existing vendor work, not tied to Trevor's disputed authority, could continue while the replacement terms were negotiated. Payroll would not be treated as a bargaining chip. and the food bank campaign could be rescheduled once funding was placed under the approved structure. I looked at Trevor. That was the part he had kept putting in front of me as a threat. Staff hours, vendors, Laura's charity work. The company did not need his unchecked authority to protect those people. It needed a lawful path forward. Good. That mattered more than watching Trevor lose. Frank explained the financial terms next. The $55,000 already paid to Trevor's LLC would be repaid or credited through the settlement process. The unpaid balance would be canceled. Nobody called the police, and no judge settled anything that afternoon. The consequences came through the company and settlement process the documents had already set in motion. Then Frank reached the last condition. The correction. Trevor stared at him. Frank continued. Resolution of the related reputational claims requires a written correction to the family members, memorial committee, and relevant business recipients who received statements questioning Scott's honesty or financial competence. Trevor looked at me. You're really doing this to me? I folded Laura's revocation and put it back into the wallet. You did it on April 14th. His face changed. You did it again at your mother's funeral. Trevor's voice dropped. I'm still your son. My hand stopped on the zipper. I know exactly who you are. He waited. I stood. Being my son did not erase the signature. It did not move the donation box back onto the table. It did not put the cropped sentence back into Laura's email. And it did not make accountability cruelty. Trevor looked up at me. Do you even still consider me your son? I picked up the blue wallet. When you're ready to stop asking blood to erase what you chose, we can talk about what comes after. Then I left him at the table with the papers he had signed. Trevor's correction arrived 12 days after the conference. Not because he suddenly wanted to write it, because the settlement paperwork required him to. Frank forwarded me the final copy before it went out. The email was short enough to fit on one screen. At the memorial reception for my mother, Laura Whitaker, I publicly questioned my father's honesty regarding the missing donation box. I knew the box had been moved from the reception area before I made those statements. The donations were recovered intact, and Scott Whitaker did not take them. Statements I made suggesting that he was dishonest or unable to handle financial matters were not accurate. No apology, no explanation about grief, no sentence asking anyone to understand him, just facts. It went to the relatives who had been in the room, the memorial committee, and the business contacts who had received his earlier comments about me. Replies started within the hour. Marcy wrote that she was sorry she had repeated Trevor's version without asking me directly. One vendor sent a 2-sentence note, saying the correction matched the records they had since reviewed. Others said nothing at all. That was fine. I did not need a parade. For months, I had watched one bad sentence about me travel farther than the truth, because it was easier to repeat. Now the correction sat in the same inboxes. Diane called 10 minutes after hers arrived. I got Trevor's email. So did I. I should have said something that day. My coffee maker clicked off behind me. You did say something. She was quiet. You told me to let it go. I know. And then you used Laura to tell me why. Another pause. That was wrong, Diane said. I ran my thumb around the rim of my mug. I'm not asking you to choose between me and Trevor. I know, but don't bring Laura into a conversation to make me surrender a fact you don't like. You're right. I let that answer stand. Nothing needed softening. The business consequences took longer. Whitaker Digital Strategy LLC repaid the $55,000 it had already received through the settlement process. The other half of Trevor's proposed fee never left Whitaker Kitchen Media. Elaine documented both items in the transition report, along with the loss of Trevor's management authority. His chief digital officer title did not turn into a ceremonial punishment. It ended under the company process. That meant salary and authority tied to the role ended too. No police showed up at his house. No television crew waited on the sidewalk. He simply stopped having a key to decisions he had treated as his own. The licensing package survived, but not in the form Trevor signed. Martin's company negotiated a replacement agreement with Elaine acting through the approved management structure. The project shrank in a few places, mostly where the original rollout had depended too heavily on Trevor's consulting company, but the core survived. Maria got her Friday hours back first. Then the postponed food bank shoot returned to the schedule. One afternoon, I walked through the studio and heard cases rolling across the concrete floor again. Somebody had burned coffee near the edit room. A production assistant was arguing with a printer that had jammed on shipping labels. Ordinary problems. I had missed them. Maria saw me standing near the schedule board. "You planning to manage from the doorway now?" she asked. "No." "Good. You were making me nervous." I laughed for the first time in that room since Laura died. The food bank allocation remained where Laura had put it in the company documents. No one had to depend on Trevor or me deciding whether to be generous that quarter. Royalties moved under the formula she had approved, and the delayed campaign was put back on the calendar with a smaller launch and a real budget behind it. Megan stayed through the transition. Elaine kept her on logistics because she knew the vendor calendar better than almost anyone. But her access changed. No private document routing. No unsupervised handling of sensitive financial materials. Megan noticed, of course. One evening, while we were packing archived contracts, she held up a labeled storage box. "This one goes to Elaine?" "Yes." She set it on the cart. Then she said, "Scott, I know I already told Frank this, but I should have spoken at the funeral." "You should have." Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "I was scared Trevor would put it on me." "I know. That isn't an excuse." "No." She nodded once. "Thank you for not pretending it is." We finished the box. That was as close to forgiveness as I could honestly get then. By late fall, Elaine had everything she needed from me. The final transition meeting happened in the same conference room where Trevor had once pushed a settlement across the table and told me everybody would lose if I refused. This time only Elaine, Frank, and I were there. I transferred the remaining business files under my temporary authority: vendor histories, contract indexes, insurance records, old production schedules, my paper museum, reduced to labeled archive cartons, and a digital index. Frank held up the blue leather wallet. "Estate archive?" I took it from him one last time. The leather had softened where my thumb had worried the edge for months. Inside sat Laura's original revocation, protected now in an archival sleeve. For a while, that wallet had been the object Trevor feared most. Then it became the thing I carried into every important meeting. Now it was paper again. "Estate archive," I said. Frank placed it in the box. Elaine handed me a final acknowledgement. "With this, your transition duties are substantially complete." I signed. "No president title?" Frank asked. "Not unless you plan to forge one." He smiled. I left the conference room without a company title. The parking garage smelled like cold concrete and exhaust. My phone rang before I reached the truck. "Trevor." I let it ring twice before answering. "Dad." "Trevor. I wanted to tell you the repayment cleared." Frank told me. Of course he did. His old irritation was still there. Quieter, but not gone. Trevor cleared his throat. "I did what the settlement required." "Yes." And I sent the correction. "Yes." Another pause. "I was trying to do what Mom wanted." There it was. I leaned against the truck door. "No. You don't know that. Neither do you." His breathing came through the phone. "I knew her too." "I never said you didn't." "Then why do you keep acting like everything I did came from greed?" "I don't." That stopped him. "You worked hard," I said. "You helped build the digital business. You also signed after Mom revoked your authority, put your company inside the deal, and used me as cover when the questions started. Both things can be true." Trevor didn't answer. "If you want a relationship with me," I continued, "there are conditions." "Of course there are. No business access through me. Don't send Diane or anybody else to pressure me. Don't quote your mother to end an argument. And don't ask me to pretend the funeral was a misunderstanding." "How long?" "There isn't a deadline." "That's convenient." "No. A deadline would let you perform until a date." Silence. Then Trevor said, "So I just wait?" "You live differently. I'll notice or I won't." He did not like that answer. I could hear it. But he said, "All right." We ended the call without saying we loved each other. Months later, the food bank held the delayed community event in a converted warehouse near Pittsburgh. Laura's name hung on a banner above the serving line, smaller than it would have been under Trevor's original rollout. That suited me. Maria waved from a folding table covered in donation cards. Megan worked check-in with another staff member beside her. Elaine stood near the stage talking to two food bank directors. Nobody owned the room. One of the organizers touched my elbow. "Mr. Whitaker, we saved you a seat up front." I looked toward the first row. A white card with my name sat between donors and local sponsors. "Thanks," I said. "I'm good back here." I took a chair beside two former crew members who had worked with Laura before anyone knew what a digital channel was. My phone vibrated in my pocket. "Trevor." The preview showed only the first line. I almost didn't look. Then I read it. "I heard the food bank event went well. I won't ask Diane to call you." There was more below the preview. I put the phone face down on my knee. Maria leaned over and asked if I remembered the first food drive Laura ever filmed. I turned toward her. "Every bad take." She laughed. The next speaker stepped up to the microphone, and I slid my phone back into my pocket. What you can take from this story is simple. Being family does not give someone permission to rewrite the truth, control your reputation, or use your grief as a moment when you are easier to pressure. When an accusation is made in front of other people, especially one that questions your honesty, staying quiet just to keep the peace can carry a cost. People remember what they heard first. If the accusation is later proven false, the correction should reach the same people who heard the original claim. You can also see why records matter. A date on a document, an email showing who received it, a message showing who gave an instruction. And a payment record can do more than an angry argument ever will. That does not mean you should collect evidence to punish somebody. It means that when money, business authority, inheritance, or a family reputation is involved, you should keep clear records and avoid relying on memory alone. If something important is signed, changed, revoked, paid, or transferred, keep a copy and understand what it actually says. Another lesson is that protecting a family member from consequences is not always the same as helping them. You can love your son, daughter, sibling, or parent and still refuse to sign a false statement, cover up a financial decision, or pretend a public humiliation never happened. A boundary becomes real when it has a consequence. If someone wants trust restored, words should not be enough. You can look for repayment, correction of false claims, respect for the limits you set, and different behavior over time. This story also shows why you should be careful when somebody repeatedly tells you what another person supposedly wanted. A dead spouse, parent, or grandparent cannot step into the room and correct the speaker. Whenever possible, go back to the person's actual words, documents, instructions, and decisions. Do not let another relative turn, "Mom would have wanted this," or "Dad said you couldn't handle it," into a substitute for evidence. You should also notice that justice does not require destroying everything around the person who hurt you. The strongest response may be the one that separates the wrongdoer from the power they misused while protecting employees, charities, customers, or other relatives who had nothing to do with the betrayal. That takes more patience than revenge in the heat of the moment, but it leaves fewer innocent people paying the bill, and grief is not a free pass. People can make mistakes while exhausted, frightened, or mourning, but there is a difference between one bad moment and a pattern of choices. When someone had several chances to tell the truth, correct the record, or step back from a conflict of interest and chose not to, you are allowed to judge the pattern instead of accepting the excuse. If you were in this position, what would have been hardest for you? Hearing your own family question your honesty, discovering that the story had been shaped before you knew there was a fight, or refusing an easy settlement because it left the lie untouched? And if the person who betrayed you later accepted the consequences and changed their behavior over time, would you rebuild the relationship? Or would some boundaries remain permanent?